Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Vanishing Hero, by DarthValgaav. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin The Vanishing Hero. This is the story that I wrote for We the Celestials. Like with Shield Hero, which I am also posting on this site as well as AO3, I am in the process of turning my scripts that I wrote for them into story format, as many of these stories will never be finished and seen on YouTube. I believe right now, they are expecting people to pay to hear the half-finished audio work rather than seeing it for free on YouTube. Good news is I don't have to worry about word limits and the like. A long, long time ago there was a great war unlike anything seen before with human eyes. For this was not a war raged between the nations of man, but rather the divine as a three-way conflict between God and his angels, the devils, and the fallen angels ranged across the heavens as well as the earth. All to see who would, in the end, take control over the world. Then, one day, from out of the blue the war was interrupted by two great dragons. No one knew why they were fighting, all they knew was that the two great beasts cared not where they took their brawl. They fought wherever they pleased, including on the battlefield of the Great War. And when the three great powers tried to get them to stop or to take their own battle somewhere else, the two dragons became enraged, for it is not wise to get in the middle of a fight between dragons. Eventually, the three leaders of the great factions called a pause to the war in order to deal with the two dragons. The three stood there, united in a single cause as the dragons bared their fangs and claws at them. The two great beasts attacked, aiming to eat the heads of the leaders of heaven, hell, and the fallen angels. Yet, despite their power rivaling that of gods, the two dragons were defeated, their bodies were cut into pieces and their souls sealed into humans as what would later be called sacred gears. These sacred gears, or God's artifacts, allowed the humans who received them to enact miracles on earth. Since that day so long ago, many different humans have held within the powers of these sacred gears. Each one of them making their mark in the pages of history, becoming legends. Yet, no matter how long time flowed, the longing to do battle between these dragons never ceased. It seemed that, without fail, the hosts of the sacred gears would seek the other out to fight. Though that conflict never changed, the world around them did. The human race, which had only ever received supernatural powers from various sacred gears sprinkled into the masses, would eventually gain powers of their own without the need of the divine. This change began with the arrival of the glowing baby in China. From there, powers known as quirks began to spread all over the world, with 80% of the population having at least some sort of power. From there, the world changed into something straight out of the comic books as the impossible was made a reality. However, the same could not be said for one Izuku Midoriya. "Where do you think you're going, Deku?" yelled Katsuki Bakugo, his voice ringing through the classroom, followed soon by the sound of a loud explosion before dark smoke filled half the room. A cry of pain rang through the air as the class heard someone rolling on the ground, their bag and books getting scattered all around before the boy hit the back wall of the classroom. As the smoke cleared, most of the students looked on with mild interest as Bakugo, the one who had caused the explosion, grabbed his target by his uniform jacket and pulled him up to his feet. Some even began smirking, leaning back in their seats as Bakugo towered over the trembling form of a green-haired boy with diamond-shaped freckles. No one said anything as frightened tears began forming in Izuku's eyes, letting out a yelp as Bakugo's right hand slammed onto the boy's shoulder, gripping it tightly as the sound of several small pops could be heard as well as the sight of smoke rising up between the boy's fingers. But nobody in the room rushed to his defense, nor did they even bother to find a teacher to put an end to this. After all, why should they? Izuku Midoriya was quirkless, a person born without any sort of superhuman ability. What was strange was that he should have gotten one of his parents' quirks or a combination of both. Yet, he had nothing. Thus, as the nickname Bakugo gave him all those years ago stated, he was useless. A Deku. But, despite this fact, Izuku had a dream. One which all the students in Aldera Middle School had mocked Midoriya forever since the day he had been declared quirkless. And it was this dream that enraged Bakugo. "You were there, weren't you?" screamed Bakugo, his face inches away from his targets. Izuku flinched due to both the volume and the spit flying right into his face. At the mock exam for the hero course. Don't you dare lie to me, you med worthless nerd. I overheard some of those extras talking about you while I was in the bathroom, talking about some mumbling freak taking notes on everyone he saw. You really think you can compete against me? NN no Keikaken, stammered Izuku in both panic and pain. I'm really not trying to compete against anyone. Honest. As Bakugo glared at the teen with explosive fury, a few members of the class laughed aloud. It was just so absurd that, no matter what people told him, Midoriya refused to learn the simple truth that he could never, ever, become a hero. He had no quirk, no strength of his own. Sure, some schools like had eased up on their acceptance policies into hero courses and allowed those with no quirks to enter, but nobody actually believed that there was a quirkless person out there that could succeed in getting in. It was all for the publicity. But, no matter how many times these simple facts were told to him, Izuku Midoriya refused to back down from his dream of becoming a hero. If only he would just give up, then maybe he wouldn't be bullied so much. And there was nobody who bullied Izuku more than his former childhood friend, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo, who had been blessed with an amazingly powerful and flashy quirk, practically making it his destiny to become a great hero, something that he liked to remind his classmates of whenever the opportunity arose, much to their chagrin. To have someone like Izuku even consider climbing to the same heights as Bakugo angered the teen like nothing else. You really think you, quirkless loser, can get into you? Bakugo continued to yell, new veins appearing on the sides of his head as he did. I'm sick and tired of you looking down on me, Deku. I'm going to remind you of your place once and for all. Maybe this will get it through your med head. As Bakugo pulled back his left arm, a larger explosion than the normal pops he would make when bullying Midoriya erupted, causing the class to become deathly silent. Tension now filled the air as many of those watching now wished they were somewhere, anywhere, else, as they could tell this wasn't like what Bakugo had done in the past. Normally, Bakugo would verbally assault the green-haired teen and use his explosions to either knock Izuku against a wall or as intimidation. The blonde bomber wasn't stupid, always in control of the force of his explosions to make sure he didn't leave any lasting damage or cause enough harm that would get him barred from entering any hero school. But now, that explosion he just used, would surely be enough to leave Midoriya with burn marks on his face. Possibly even scars. Was the mere fact that Izuku was not just talking about entering but actually making a physical effort to get in enraging Bakugo this much? Or was this a case of the straw that broke the camel's back? Either way, Midoriya was going to be in a world of hurt. And the quirkless boy knew it as well, still feeling the heat on his face from that last blast. Oh no, 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 no. Thought a panicking Izuku. He's really lost it this time. Kaken's really going to kill me. And nobody's going to save me. I have to do something. Izuku's body trembled out of control, more tears forming in his eyes as the inevitable seemed to slow down before him. He could make out every bead of nitro sweat on his bully's open palm as it seemed to gather to create another large blast. He could see the motion of Bakugo pulling his arm back, getting ready to slam his hand into Izuku's face. If only he had some sort of quirk that could help him. A strength enhancement to help him break free of the grasp. A reflection quirk to just redirect the blast. A warping quirk so that he could be anywhere else. Heck, he'd even settle for a slime quirk so that he could just melt out of Bakugo's grip and escape through a crack in the wall or under the door. Only, he had none of those. As Bakugo's hand began moving closer to him, something awoke within Izuku. Perhaps it was just his fight or flight instinct, the voice of his longing to take flight finally going hoarse and allowing fight to be heard. Perhaps it was just his longing to not be a victim of this anymore, having finally reached his limits. Or it could just be the knowledge that no matter what he did he was going to get hurt, so he might as well try and fight back. So, Izuku reached out with his DM left hand to grab Katsuki's wrist. An act that, at first, startled the blonde. Then, like clockwork, Bakugo became angrier. But Izuku did not back down as a strange feeling began moving through his body and into his hand. This feeling, this power, began to shift and change rapidly around his hand, making him feel like his hand was changing into something, clawed. Only it wasn't. It was still the same hand that Izuku used to take all his hero notes. Just a bit brighter. Then, Izuku heard a voice in the back of his mind. "About time you did that," came a booming, powerful, and somehow ancient voice that seemed to echo all around him. "I was beginning to wonder if you would ever stand up for yourself. Now let us take his power for our own. Divide." Izuku's shout, along with a bright blue light coming from Izuku's left hand, caught the blonde bomber off guard, his wrist twisting so that his palm faced his victim while letting out an explosive blast. However, compared to previous explosions, this one wasn't all that bad. It had force behind it, but only enough to compare to a powerful wind that would make walking a tad more strenuous. As for the heat, it wasn't the searing heat Izuku had known for so many years, but rather simple warmth. What's more, Izuku felt a surge of power running through him like nothing he had ever felt before. The sugar rush he felt when he was a little kid and had eaten 12 All Might limited edition chocolate bars had nothing on this. "Why are you just standing there?" demanded the voice. "Quick! Use the energy boost to take this whelp down before he recovers." Izuku blinked as the voice rang through his head once more, noticing at the same time a shocked Bakugo trying to escape from the young Midoriya's grasp. "Yes, trying." Bakugo, the strongest person in their class, was struggling to free himself from Izuku's grip. Instinct took over again, Izuku flinging Bakugo's arm to the side like it was the easiest thing in the world before bringing his arm back to elbow the mighty Bakugo right in the face. Izuku watched as the ashen blonde spun in the air slightly before crashing to the ground, where he then rolled into a nearby desk. For a moment, Izuku stood there as he breathed hard until he realized what he had just done. He had just knocked Bakugo down like it was nothing. And what was scary about it all was just how easy it had all been. Like something had sapped away most of the bully's strength. And how did he move that fast? Slowly looking up, Izuku began to sweat as he realized the entire class was watching him with wide-eyed expressions. Just then, someone gave his flight instinct a glass of water, for it screamed at him to run. To put as much distance between him and everyone else as possible, because, when Bakugo got up, well, Izuku didn't need to finish that thought as he grabbed all his stuff from the floor before hightailing it out of there at full speed. What just happened? What just happened? What just happened? This single sentence was on an infinite loop, the green-haired teen asking this over and over again as he ran at full speed back to his home. Once inside the apartment, he locked the door before heading to his own room, where he leaned his back against the door. His legs felt weak, his uniform now drenched in sweat from that epic run with no breaks. His hands jittered as he allowed his backpack to drop to the floor. Then, slowly, Izuku sank to the floor with his back never leaving the door. The body could feel his body crashing, the burst of energy he had gained with his fight with Bakugo having vanished shortly after he left the classroom. He had called on every reserve of energy he had in his being and then some just to keep running. To put as much distance between him and his bully. And now, with his body finally crashing, all the teen was left with were his thoughts. So, as he sat there, his mind tried its best to piece together what had happened. Had someone used their quirk to save him? He was quirkless after all, so that made sense. Perhaps a teacher or another student. That thought was quickly struck down though. Logically, if there was a teacher nearby, they would have stepped in to put a stop to it themselves rather than using their quirk and getting in trouble. Also, Izuku knew the quirks of all the teachers at his middle school. Heck, he even knew the quirk from that substitute teacher who had come from the nearby town of Kuo. And none of the other students he was aware of had a quirk that could give someone else power like that. Did that mean? Did he dare hope? Heart pounding, Izuku crawled on the floor to get to his desk. As much as his body protested, demanding that he lay there for a few hours or days, Izuku forced himself up and onto his chair before pulling out a notebook. One whose title on the cover was written in crayons, Hero analysis of Izuku Midoriya. His hands trembled, now with excitement as he opened the first page, seeing that it was mostly empty save for a single word that he had written so long ago. Quirkless. Around that word were several stains created from the tears that had been pouring down from his eyes. New watermarks threatened to join them, but Izuku managed to hold them back. Finding a spot below that word, Izuku brought the tip of his pen to the line. Then, he took a deep breath to calm his nerves before beginning to write. As Izuku wrote down his theories on what he believed his quirk might be, someone else was looking through the teen's eyes. Or, rather, something. This being deep within, Izuku watched on in silence as Izuku's pen flew over the page, noting the meticulous way the boy was breaking down how his quirk worked. He may not have had the same level of brilliance as his former host, but the boy was no slouch. With time, he would become a worthy vessel. However, when the teen wrote down that his quirk might be causing him to hallucinate voices, the being within Izuku could no longer keep quiet. "I can assure you I am no mere hallucination," stated the voice. The suddenness as well as the power behind these words caused Izuku to jump in his chair, his pen being flung into the air. Briefly, the teen looked around, trying to see if there was anyone around, only to then realize that he had heard that voice before. In school. And in his head. Okay. "I'm still hearing voices," said Izuku aloud as he tried to make sense of everything. "I hope that this is because of my quirk, like some sort of side effect." "I am neither a side effect nor am I a quirk," grumbled the voice. "Ah, okay. Then what are you?" asked the teen, wondering where this would go. "My name is Albion, the White Dragon Emperor," was the reply, its tone holding no small hint of pride. "Also known as the Vanishing Dragon. Long ago, I was defeated by the leaders of the three great powers before having my soul and power sealed away into what would be later known as scared gears. Think of them as superpowers before the age of what you call quirks." Izuku sat there, listening to the voice now known as Albion, taking in what it was saying before coming to the most logical conclusion. "So I guess I must have a sentient quirk then," said the boy, excitement slowly growing in his voice. "It would have to have some ability to think in order to make up such a story. I have heard about the existence of such quirks, but I never thought that I would actually have one." Albion, in response, just let out a sigh. "I should have realized that words alone might not be enough to convince you. Perhaps a demonstration of my powers are in order." Before Izuku could say or do anything, that same strange feeling he had before he activated his quirk began moving through his body and into his left hand. With wide-eyed fascination, Izuku watched as his left hand began to glow blue, hoping to see his quirk in action again so that he could have more notes. He had expected a great many things to happen, like the power in the room dwindling or the batteries in his devices having their energy lives cut in half and then feeling a great charge of power. What he didn't expect was for his left hand to become a white, clawed gauntlet with a blue gem on the back of his hand. "Now witness me in my original form." Izuku sat there shocked as the voice he had been hearing in his head was now coming from the blue gem. But before he could dwell on that, the room around him vanished only to be replaced by scattered white clouds within a seemingly endless blue sky. Then, rising from below, was a dragon. A large Western-style dragon with white scales so appealing that they seemed to glow along with blue eyes, two golden horns on top of his head, and feathered wings that reminded him of an Aztec god he had once read about. And as Izuku sat there, staring into the blue eyes that stared right back into his own, he could feel the power of this great beast that dwarfed him in every way possible. A power that was real. This dragon was real. There was no way his quirk could do what it did back at school and show him all this. With that, Izuku found himself back in his room, having never left his seat with the blue gem now embedded in his left hand. "So, it's true," whispered Izuku as the truth began to set in. "I don't have a quirk. Everything that happened back in that classroom was because of you." As Izuku stared at the gem, he could feel his heart pinching in the most painful of ways while tears began to form in his eyes. It was like the world's cruelest joke. To have him think that, after all these years, he finally had a quirk, that he could finally be a hero, only to find out it was a lie. He didn't blame Albion since he probably didn't intend to get Izuku's hopes up, just wanting to protect his host or something like that. "You are wrong, human," said Albion firmly, instantly getting Izuku's attention. "When your soul was created, the scared gear divine dividing was fused into it, becoming one with you. Its power became your power. When you stood up for yourself and tried to fight back, your subconscious called upon it. All I did was offer some brief guidance." The despair that Izuku felt quickly morphed into confusion as he continued to stare at the gem. Then why couldn't use this power before? I mean, Kaken used to beat me up all the time when we were kids. The main reason was that your body was too weak to handle the transfer of power, Albion responded with a sigh. Most of the assumptions you made in your notes are correct. Divine dividing is a power that transfers half of the strength and powers of your opponent before adding what was stolen to your own abilities. With this power, you will always be at your peak while your enemy gets weaker faster. However, when you were younger, your body could not handle the strain of taking in the stored power. As such, you were unable to use divine dividing. Izuku's eyes widened at that. "And now I am strong enough?" Izuku asked, his voice full of hope. "Heh. Just barely, and I'm being generous here," laughed Albion, causing Izuku's head to drop. "In truth, what you saw on your hand was just the first stage of divine dividing. A half-awake form, if you will. In order to gain access to my full power, your body is going to need to become stronger." For a moment, Izuku felt himself deflate at Albion's statement of him being weak. Not that it wasn't true, he was built like a straw man after all. It was, well, he had hoped that this quirk would be able to change that. Make him stronger so that he could become a hero. Yet, a moment later, Izuku's eyes brightened as he realized what Albion was saying. If this was just what the bare minimum of dividing could do, just imagine what it would be capable of once he grew stronger. The full access to everything that Izuku felt when he saw Albion in his true form. Just imagine how many people he could save with that sort of strength. Quickly turning back to his notebook, he began writing ideas at a frantic pace. "Alright," began Izuku over the scribbling of his pen, jotting down his plans. "So, first off, I'm going to need to register divine dividing as my quirk. That will give me time to figure out what sort of training I should be doing to boost my overall physical abilities. Let's see, I could try getting a bunch of weight and using them. Maybe even jogging with weights. I heard that helps with some people. Or I could look online for a workout program. Wait, maybe join a dojo or a gym. That might actually kill two birds with one stone." "What are you thinking, partner?" asked Albion. Grinning, Izuku pulled out his phone and began typing in his search while barely noting the fact that he was being called partner. "Well, the way I see it, I not only need to be able to handle this strength but also how to use it to its full advantage," explained Izuku. "Meaning I'm going to need to learn how to fight. A dojo will not only help me improve my strength and stamina but also teach me how to fight. I might not be able to go blow to blow with someone who has been studying for years, but I'll at least get the basics down before taking the entrance exam. The same goes for a gym. They'll be able to provide a number of different workout classes as well as some self-defense classes or kickboxing." As Izuku began looking up the nearby gyms to see what sort of classes they offered and how much, Albion grinned. His newest host was certainly interesting. "The Vanishing Hero, so, this is the place you have chosen." Izuku nodded as Albion's words echoed through his head, standing stiffly at the entrance of the dojo waiting for someone to greet him. Waiting to meet the person who could give Izuku the training he needed to better handle divine dividing and become the hero he always wanted to be. It had been a day and a half since Izuku had first communicated with the dragon dwelling inside of him. During that time, Izuku had researched every gym, dojo, training program, and personal trainer he could find on the web. He examined everything with the same level of scrutiny that he gave when examining heroes' quirks and their potential. From their hours of operations, the various types of training they provided, equipment, lesson plans, and even who the instructors were. Well, all that as well as making sure that it was within his family's budget. When Inko had returned home the day Izuku had awakened his quirk, the young man had rushed over to her before she could close the door to their apartment to tell her the good news. Naturally, she was a little bit skeptical that he had just now awakened a quirk since such things were very rare. As in she could count on one hand the number of times she knew it had happened from all the research she had done back when Izuku was little and still awaiting his quirk. But after having Albion's gem appear on the back of his left hand and using his divide on her, Inko was sold. That night, emotions ran high as both Midoriyas broke down in happy tears. Even more so when the Midoriya matriarch sent a quick text message to her husband who then, after only a few minutes of receiving the text, called Izuku to congratulate him. After a long talk with his dad, Izuku put his phone on speaker in order to reaffirm his longing to become a hero and ask for their support. "Alright, we'll support you as best we can," said Izuku's father over the phone, his voice, though happy, sounding a little tired. As if he were struggling to stay awake. "But, only as long as you keep your grades up," added Inko. "I know you have a lot of catching up to do and there's not a lot of time before the entrance exam for you, eh? However, that's no reason for you to neglect your studies in the name of pushing yourself." With that promise easily made, Izuku was given his price range. Within the time between then and his mother taking him to get his quirk registered, Izuku had crossed off a number of potential training options. Most of the personal trainers were out since each of the sessions would cost the same as the monthly training allowance. The same went for certain gyms run by former heroes, though that had more to do with the fact that they were just using their slowly dying name recognition to score some easy cash. At least, that's what Izuku came to after reading the very negative reviews and comments made about these places. Thankfully, there were a few good ones out there. Some even offered hero in training courses for people his age that would allow quirk training under their supervision. Oh, yes, that was very tempting for Izuku. In the end, Izuku ended up choosing a dojo without a lot of reviews, good or bad, that was close to the higher end of his budget. To anyone else, this might have seemed like a huge mistake on his part. But Izuku had his reasons. The first was the man who ran the dojo. While he was never a hero, at least not one Izuku or the internet knew of, the man had studied and mastered many martial arts from all over the world. In fact, he was so skilled that some hero agencies would contact him in order to train their sidekicks. He also boasted that he could help people find the fighting style that fit his students the best. Not only that, but if you were willing to put in the work, he would help you create your own style. Now that was something that would greatly help Izuku. Another reason Izuku wanted to go here was because of the rooftop parkour classes that you could sign up for. Albion had explained to him that the more he used divine dividing, the more it would drain his stamina. The only reason he hadn't felt it when he used it on Kaken, or that whelp, as Albion liked to call him, was because of the adrenaline rushing through his system. Meaning that if Izuku was going to be in situations where he would need to use divine dividing multiple times, then it wouldn't matter how strong he kept his body if he passed out. What's more, after doing some research into the subject, parkour seemed like it would be ideal for hero training. Not only would it give him a full-body workout, but it would help increase his bone strength and endurance. And that was just how it would improve his body. How many times had he watched heroes leaping from building to building as they tried their best to get to the scene of a villain attack or other disasters? Or used the surrounding area in a fight? The more Izuku thought about it, the more he began to realize that taking up parkour would help him improve as a hero. There were a few other things that he found in his research that parkour was supposed to help him with. Some of it he could believe while the rest, well, he just didn't. Like, he could see how leaping from rooftop to rooftop, jumping from one wall to the next in order to climb upward, lunging from railing to railing would help improve his quick thinking, creativity, and even help him with a fear of heights. However, he still wasn't sold on how this would improve self-confidence and reduce antisocial behavior. So now, here he was, dressed in a plain white shirt and jeans as he looked around at the seemingly empty dojo. The place looked and felt bigger than it did in the photos, with a wide empty place in the middle to train. Looking up, Izuku saw that the room had a second story that only had a catwalk where people could stand and look down as they watched bouts. That or they could also be used in some extreme matches. Also on the catwalk was a pretty girl who, Izuku's brain needed a moment to reboot as his eyes focused on the sight before him. There, standing on the railing was a very pretty girl dressed in a white gi. Her orange hair was tied to the side in a ponytail while her eyes were hidden behind a blndfld as she continued to walk on the catwalk. Every once in a while, the girl would do a cartwheel, making the boy's heart race with fear that she would fall and break her neck. But such things never happened as she just moved with what seemed to him like calculated grace with each move. Finally, after making 2 laps around the second floor, the girl leaped toward the ground. Twice she spun around before she landed, punching the ground as she did so as if it were the finishing move in a video game or something. Then, she stood up. As the girl untied the blndfld from her eyes, she shook her hair slightly, giving it that brief wavy motion that reminded Izuku of the brilliant orange leaves billowing in the fall wind. And when he saw her eyes, Izuku couldn't help but gulp as his face turned red at seeing those teal eyes beaming with life and pride. Eyes that soon fell upon him. "Hey there," said the very pretty girl in the friendliest voice any girl had ever spoken to him in. "Didn't hear you come in. Are you here to sign up at our dojo?" As the girl gave him a friendly smile, all Izuku could do was stand there as a strangled, almost whimpering noise escaped his throat. A girl was talking to him. Not mocking or laughing at him, but talking to him like a normal teenager. And she was smiling at him so warmly. His brain didn't know how to process this and was on the verge of needing to be rebooted once more. So all he could do was stand there, stiff as a board with his eyes wide. This, naturally, didn't go unnoticed by the girl as her smile became a bit forced. "Ah, okay. I'll, get my parents and maybe they can help you." With that, the girl turned and began walking away. As she did, Izuku's eyes continued to take her in. From her broad, powerful shoulders all the way down to her no. No, 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 no. No. I refuse to go through this again. Refuse. Albion's sudden, desperate cry snapped Izuku out of his trance as he jumped at least a foot into the air. After landing and clutching at his heart, he looked down at the blue gem that had reappeared in his left hand in confusion. Albion, what was that about? Thought Izuku, communicating directly to the dragon merged with his soul. For a moment, Izuku just stood as he listened to the heavy breathing of Albion. What in the world could have caused a dragon like him to panic so much? Sorry, partner," Albion said eventually. "I just had. Well, what I mean to say is, my last partner had certain tastes that sort of. He wasn't as bad as this other human, but all the same, I just thought, for a moment, that you might have similar tastes is all." And the thought of having to go through all that again caused a bit of a panic attack. Izuku nodded his head in understanding. There had been times when a sudden bang had caused similar fears within him as they brought back certain memories of the past. Of being on the ground, helpless with a certain ashen blonde standing above him. The feeling of being utterly helpless within that old playground. The feeling of being a Deku. "I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do?" thought Izuku sympathetically. "No, no, I'm fine," was the reply from the ancient dragon, his breathing now fully under control. "Been through enough group therapy to last me a lifetime and beyond." Izuku nodded as he looked up. The pretty girl was gone, but he could now hear footsteps approaching. Taking a deep breath, Izuku straightened himself as he mentally prepared himself to meet his sensei. He could do this. He knew he could. Even if there was a pretty girl in the room, he could manage a conversation. A few minutes later proved Izuku wrong. Standing before him were 3 people. The pretty girl, and her parents. And it was clear that the girl got her looks from her mother. The woman's hair was the same color of orange, except she kept hers loose and flowing all the way down to her shoulders. What's more was that she was dressed in a black, skin-tight bodysuit that showed off her curves. Then there was the father, his sensei, who was a tall, bald man with a black beard that was pointed in the front and on both sides. He stood there in a sleeveless gi, arms crossed as he looked down at the boy he could probably crush into powder using only his thumb. "So, do you wish to train here at this dojo? Did your parents send you here to toughen you up or something?" Izuku flinched at the man's tone and words. His voice was deep by nature while the tone told Izuku that he had little interest in him. And going by what he had just said, caused Izuku to wonder just how many kids had entered through those doors for that exact reason. With his body shaking slightly, Izuku managed to look that man in the eyes. "No, sir. I wanted this," the young man managed to say with a minimal amount of stuttering. Before Izuku could avert his gaze, he saw the man's eyebrow rise slightly. He also noted that the woman's eyes seemed to sparkle a bit with excitement. Then, when the man spoke again, his tone was a tad warmer. "Friendlier. I see," said Mr. Kendo, a slight smile almost visible on his face. "Well then, tell me what you hope to accomplish by training here." Izuku took a deep breath before looking back at the man, his eyes shining with all the will and determination the boy had in his body. As he did this, the man standing before the young Midoriya couldn't help but smile a bit. "I want to become a hero, more than anything else in the world," he said almost instantly. However, that rush quickly died as he lowered his head slightly. I know I'm probably not much to look at right now. That I'm weak, worthless even. But I want to change that. I promise I'll work hard and dash." Izuku stopped as the man placed a meaty hand on his shoulder, nearly knocking him down. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the pretty girl frowning while her mother's look became concerned. "Young man, if you did come here by your own choice, then you are most certainly not weak. Nor are you worthless," said Mr. Kendo in a firm tone, the type that stated that this was final. As he lifted his hand off Izuku, whose heart seemed ready to burst. A part of him wanted to clutch at it while tears poured from his eyes, yet the man's gaze commanded Izuku to remain focused on him. "Now, before I can even consider taking you in as a student, I would like to know how such thoughts came to be. Is it because your quirk is extremely weak, or are you quirkless?" A lump formed in Izuku's throat as he thought about his past. Thought about that day in the playground when he had tried to protect a fellow kid from being bullied by Kaken. About how he had gotten the nickname Deku. He thought back to the laughter that always followed whenever he told others about his dream. Then he looked up at the man standing before him, took a deep breath, and began to tell him what he could. Naturally, he told him the same thing he had told his parents about divine dividing. And he gave a less than detailed account of what life had been like for him. Never giving out names or going too deep into detail. But despite that, Izuku had a feeling that the man was filling in the blanks all on his own. Perhaps, given the question he had asked, he had dealt with plenty of people who had been in the same position as Izuku. Maybe even some that had been worse off. When Midoriya finished, the man was silent for several seconds as he stood there nodding to himself. "Izuku Midoriya, now I am certain you are the type of person that this dojo welcomes with open arms," said Mr. Kendo as he reached out to pat the green-haired boy on the shoulder, doing his best not to knock him over. "You are the type of person that, no matter how many times you have been knocked down, have gotten back onto your feet. That there is the truest form of strength. And now, you are recognizing your flaws and seeking to improve." Izuku suddenly found a spot on the floor that was very interesting, staring at it as his face flushed with embarrassment. "I guess I should have tried doing this sooner, right?" said Midoriya, more as a statement than a question as he realized his own mistake. Both the man and Albion chuckled at that remark, the dragon's tone echoing in his head so that only he could hear. "Well, given what your dream is and that you thought that you were quirkless, I'd say not training your body at the very least was foolish," stated Mr. Kendo with a bemused smile. "But at least you recognize that now. And if that determination I saw in your eyes is anything to go by, you will be giving this your all." Izuku's eyes widened slightly at that before another question tickled in the back of his mind. One he had asked before. Given what Mr. Kendo had said prior, asking if he had been quirkless as well as what he had said after, was there a chance? Would he give a different answer? Or would Izuku be denied once more? After taking a breath to steel his nerves, Izuku spoke again, doing his best to look in the eyes of the man before him. "Ah, can I ask you something? If I had come here, still quirkless, do you think I could be a hero?" Mr. Kendo didn't answer right away. Rather he paused, stroking his beard while looking like he was collecting his thoughts. "Well, I certainly wouldn't discourage you," said Mr. Kendo at last, his words surprising Izuku. "I would rather arm you with all the tools you would need so that you could, at the very least, try. If you succeeded, then the taste of victory would wash away the bitterness of defeat you had dealt with for so long. And if you failed, then I believe you could move on from that knowing that you gave it your all. How does that saying go? Better to shoot for the stars and fall in a blaze of glory than to have never tried at all." "Yes, I believe that's it." Izuku found it harder to keep his feelings inside now. Tears were stinging around his eyes. It might not have been the words he had wanted his mother to tell him back when he was a kid, it wasn't the words he hoped his hero would tell him if they ever met. Yet after years of people telling him to not even bother, hearing someone say that he'd let him try was powerful in its own right. "Thank you, Mr. Kendo," Izuku managed to say while doing his best not to fall to his knees. So, as Izuku did his best to get himself under control, he entered the dojo to begin his training. Or, rather, to fill out the paperwork needed first. Then the training. Texas Smash. Izuku, dressed in his own white gi, charged at his training partner, Itsuka Kendo, ready to try and imitate the fighting style of his hero All Might. With a bored look, Itsuka effortlessly deflected the blow with her wrist before sending a powerful punch right into the green-haired teen's gut. As Izuku felt all the air inside him leave, his orange-haired opponent swiftly knocked him off his feet courtesy of a leg sweep. Since signing up at the Kendo dojo several days ago, finding himself lying in pain on his back was becoming a regular occurrence for the teen. Mrs. Kendo, as it turned out, was in charge of the extra lessons including parkour. And while she was starting Izuku on something simple right now, jumping over uphill railings and then back down, it was still incredibly draining to the teen. As for Mr. Kendo, Izuku had told him that he wanted to learn how to fight like All Might. The instructor hadn't put up any argument, teaching his student the way he wished after their stretches and stances with his daughter being his sparring partner. So far, things weren't going so well. He was doing everything he was told and Mr. Kendo had told him that his form was correct. So why was it that he was having so much trouble? A hand then appeared in Izuku's field of vision along with that orange hair that made his face turn a shade of red. Though, thankfully, not as red as it had been on his first day here. That day had been by far one of his worst experiences as he devolved into an awkward mess just standing before her, not knowing where to look. Izuku had, at first, decided to focus on her face. This proved to be a mistake as he had become just as flustered as when they had first met, made all the worse as she stood there looking back at him with such a soft and warm expression. As tiny squeaks escaped his mouth, Izuku shifted his eyes downward hoping that would help. No, it was worse. Because now he could see her neck along with all the exposed flesh right underneath it. Quickly, Izuku realized if he kept staring there Itsuka might think he was staring at her melons. So, to avoid being called a pervert, his gaze shifted down again to her stomach which wasn't any better. Soon enough he was looking at her legs which were moving towards him. The next thing he knew, Izuku was looking up at the ceiling in pain until Itsuka's face came into view ready to help him to his feet. It took a few more times of him getting knocked onto his back before he managed to not feel as awkward looking at her. Though, talking to her and just being too close to her were difficult at times as his face would turn bright red. As he was now feeling less awkward around her. Groaning, he took the hand and got to his feet. Thanks Itsuka, he managed to groan, accepting the offered hand and getting to his feet. No problem. As she spoke, Itsuka's voice was bright and chipper. She then smiled, something that contrasted greatly with the look she had just moments ago. Ready to try again? Yeah, began Izuku. Then, as he noticed Itsuka beginning to turn, Midoriya quickly blurted out a question. Something he had been meaning to ask for some time. But, do you have any advice on what I'm doing wrong? I mean, All Might Dash has a fighting style that fits him, interrupted Itsuka, interrupting her training partner. There was no way she could have missed the confused expression on Izuku's face, so when she spoke next it was done in what he had begun to think of as her big sister voice. The tone she used when she was explaining something, holding up a finger as she did so, all with a helpful smile on her face. Look, All Might's fighting style works well with his body type. Because he's so big and has so much mass, he can put more weight behind his attacks along with his strength. Even the most basic punch can be made several dozen times more effective because of that. He's also fast enough so that his opponents don't have time to deflect or dodge an attack. And his strength, well, you know how insane it is. Izuku let out a hum as he brought a hand to his chin, muttering to himself as a finger tapped against the side of his face. So, if I want to fight more like All Might, I need to get bigger, gain more muscle mass, get faster, and become stronger. Maybe I could start Izuku, can I ask you a question, interrupted Itsuka again. When Midoriya turned to look at her, he was surprised to see that her smile was gone. Now, she looked worried. Do you really hate yourself that much? What? Izuku shouted, taking a step back as he did so. I'm sorry, it's just, she began before pausing, looking away in a manner that seemed to show that she was having a hard time putting her thoughts into words. After a moment, it looked like she decided to just go for it. Listening to all of that makes it sound like you want to completely change who you are instead of trying something else. Izuku didn't know what to say to that at first. To be honest, he had never really thought about it. Sure, he idolized All Might, but who didn't? He was the greatest hero of all time. Who wouldn't want to be just like him? Especially when you were everything the man wasn't. Then, when he spoke, he lowered his head slightly to avoid looking at Itsuka. For the longest time, nobody believed in me, he began, lowering his head slightly so as to avoid looking directly at Itsuka. Not my mom, the kids I used to play with. Even my best friend didn't think much of me. That's why he gave me the nickname Deku. Because it fit me so well. Because I was useless. But that never stopped me from wanting to be more like All Might. To be the type of hero who could just reassure everyone around him with a smile. To let everyone know that things would be alright because I was there. So I want to be just like him. But, if you do that, then it won't be your smile that reassures everyone. It'll still be All Might's, said Itsuka, her words causing Izuku's head to shoot up. Now he could see that she had never taken her eyes off of him, an odd smile on her face that he couldn't place. Izuku, if what you want is for people to see your smile and feel reassured, then you have to become your own hero. Don't limit yourself to thinking that there's only one way to do things. Because, if you do, you'll end up missing so much potential. My daughter is correct, came the voice of their instructor. Turning his Izuku saw that Mr. Kendo had risen from where he had been sitting as he watched their bouts. Now he had a very serious look on his face. Midoriya, if you truly wish to become a hero, then you must first overcome this handicap, yourself. Your own self-doubts and your views on All Might. Those do you a great disservice. They chain you, binding you to the ground so that you can never soar through the air on your own wings. I know you can be so much more if you just give yourself a chance. Izuku swallowed hard while grabbing a shaking arm. A part of him felt confused in so many ways. His mind was buzzing. He heard what they were saying, but how do I do that, he asked. How do you change the very idea of the pinnacle of what it means to be a hero? How do you change that image you have in your head, guarding it with everything you have? You can figure it out yourself, Mr. Kendo said simply, surprising Izuku. Do you know why? Because you, like everyone else, were born with the same thing that All Might and other great people have had. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain. No matter how the world sees them, you have everything that every pro hero had when they started out. With those same tools, you too can become great as long as you have the will. How much you're willing to hone them, how much you are willing to learn. All that is up to you. So figure out what works for Izuku Midoriya while carrying on with the spirit of All Might. And once you do, I'll help you down that path you have chosen. For a long time, Izuku just stood there as he processed what he was being told. To be honest, he had never looked at heroes that way before. He had always seen them as these amazing people like Kaken, born with the strength, courage, and drive to do whatever they wanted. But now that he thought about it, both he and Kaken had started off exactly the same. What was different, what separated him from people like Kaken and All Might, was that they got quirks. They learned how to fight with what they had been given. The same went for other heroes like Kamui Woods, Ryukyu, Endeavor, and so many others. But what would work best for him? What could he use? Izuku then blinked, realizing what they were saying about his idolization of All Might. That in wanting to be so much like his hero, he hadn't considered other options. Hadn't done the same level of research that he had used to bring him here to this dojo. After all, he had all the tools he needed. He had eyes to see so many different styles and a body to train in them. The mind to figure out if their strengths fit him and that their flaws didn't hinder him. He just needed to figure it out on his own. I believe you are beginning to understand, Albion commented in his head. Izuku nodded before looking over at his instructor. Can you show me some other fighting styles, he asked. The man grinned before nodding. The vanishing hero time passed within the Kendo dojo, with Izuku making up for all the lost time he had spent wishing he had a quirk and hoping that things would just work out. To say that Mr. Kendo was a wellspring of information regarding martial arts would have been an understatement. The man lived up to his reputation and had a level of passion for the art of combat in the same vein as Izuku himself when it came to heroes. Mr. Kendo seemed to know just about every martial art form in existence, both those still used today as well as those that hadn't really been practiced since the pyramids had been built. The man even had notebooks on some of the unique fighting styles of some of the major pro heroes, detailing their strengths and weaknesses. Not just notes, but also drawings of the stances for those heroes' finishing or signature moves. The biggest difference between their notebooks was that Mr. Kendo's writing was like a work of art compared to Izuku's hastily written notes. That passion, as Izuku quickly learned, turned out to be a double-edged sword. During Izuku's time training at the dojo, he witnessed a significant number of new students who were brought there, some seeming to be dragged, by their parents. Often, those kids looked on fearfully of everything around them as if they were unsure if this was the place for them. That or they held expressions that said they would rather be anywhere but here. As for the parents, well, they were going on and on about how they wanted Mr. Kendo to toughen them up or to just get them away from their computer games before they even made it to the back room. Those students never lasted long, doing everything in their power to get out. There were a few students, however, that stayed on longer as they became interested. Though half of those teens left as they grew annoyed at the advice Mr. Kendo gave when he suggested other forms of martial arts that they might be more interested in. An issue that Izuku no longer had. One by one, the father and daughter duo showed Izuku every martial art they knew and let him get a feel of each. The green-haired teen learned about the basics of Kenpo and karate while also experiencing being thrown with a judo technique. He experienced the rhythm of capoeira before moving on to kung fu followed by things like gunhead martial arts. In the end, Izuku discovered that the kicks he learned in Muay Thai and Taekwondo felt more natural to him. He could more easily flow into the stances of these moves and use them more effectively than what he had been trying prior. What's more, they just felt right. More so than any of the other times he tried to emulate All Might smashes. The more he learned about these styles, the more he practiced with them, the more influenced he became to make something that was his own. To use what he was learning as the foundation of his own style. But that was not the only thing that he was picking up on. Mr. Kendo and Itsuka were teaching him how to read his opponent. What a shift in their stance meant, how to tell what direction the attack was coming from, and so forth. This was something Izuku was able to pick up on fairly easily thanks to all the time he spent watching various heroes, learning to spot when they would be using their signature moves and other aspects of their quirks. Now those skills had been taken up from 10 to 20. While this was going on, his training with Mrs. Kendo was slowly producing impressive results. Bit by bit, she moved him up in his parkour routine, pushing him further and further. She showed the green-haired teen, along with the rest of the class, how to jump from one corner wall to the next in order to scale it and how to use the same trick when descending. He learned how to shift his momentum around when he fell from a high area, going into a roll so that he would sustain fewer injuries. He began to leap from building to building and, in time, went from a scrawny kid who could barely run 5 minutes before feeling like he was about to die to a well-toned, well-muscled athlete who stayed with the class even when everyone else dropped out. As for school, things had certainly changed since the day Izuku awakened Divine Dividing. The story of how Midoriya, of all people, had managed to overpower Bakugo and knock him into the desks had passed around the school so many times that it might as well have become a local legend. What's more, many of his classmates began to take notice of Izuku's ever-improving build. It was during gym class where they were playing a game of basketball with shirts versus skins, Izuku being skins, that all his hard work with the kendos had been put on display for everyone to see, to which many of his classmates complimented him. He even noticed that some of the girls, the same ones who had snickered at him and left him to the mercy of Bakugo prior, were now blushing at him. Meanwhile, with Bakugo, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the teen became more and more irritated. Whenever even the slightest bit of praise was given to Izuku in his presence, the explosive blonde would shoot death glares at the one who spoke before turning his anger on the holder of the Divine Dividing. As soon as Izuku began to perform better in P.E., or show a marked improvement in his grades, Bakugo's fist would soon slam into a desk or locker while letting out a shout of rage. As for Midoriya's quirk, Izuku repeated the same story he was telling everyone in order to avoid confusion. Nearly all of his classmates, when they heard this, just nodded while looking thoughtful and saying that it made sense to them. Bakugo, on the other hand, "You have to be kidding me," he screamed when he had heard the reason, VNs appearing on his neck as he did so. That med nerd knew about his quirk this entire time. That Deku. He was mocking me, looking down on me. Eventually, it reached the point where Bakugo blew up his own deck in a fit of rage before letting out a savage scream that promised bloody murder while eyeing his former childhood friend. It probably would have escalated further into a full-blown fight had not their homeroom teacher, as well as several others who heard the noise, rushed in at that moment. Needless to say, the teen was punished, but only with a stern warning from the principal, as he did not wish to ruin the future of such a promising student over one incident of misconduct. However, it was quickly made clear that, should anything like this happen again, the school would have to take more drastic actions. This was only enough to keep Bakugo somewhat at bay, gripping his pencil so tightly that he had to buy them in large packs daily or clawing at his new desk in order to keep himself from doing anything explosive in class. But, in those times outside of the class, Katsuki Bakugo would vent by putting the green-haired teen down with his words. "It doesn't matter what shitty quirk you now have," Bakugo had said while practically being dragged away by his closest friends. "You'll never be able to reach my level no matter how hard you try. And you'll still never get into you, eh? So quit looking down on me." And so, eventually, the day of the entrance exam loomed ever so close on the horizon. Begin. As soon as the signal was given by Mr. Kendo, both Izuku and Itsuka, both of whom were in their fighting stances, closed the distance between each other within the dojo. Sweat rolled down their faces from the several prolonged matches the pair had gone through already, caressing the slight bruises they both carried as they did. But, despite this, both teens just grinned in anticipation as their last bout of the night began. Izuku, having analyzed her fighting style for some time now, knew that she was more than likely going to start off with a powerful right hook aimed for his chest before going in with a flurry of punches. And, after staring into her eyes, knew that this time would be no different. Rather than blocking it, Izuku leaned back to allow the first blow to sail over him while at the same time kicking upwards. As he expected, Itsuka moved back to avoid the blow which nearly grazed her chin. However, Izuku wasn't done. Landing on the ground with his hands hitting the mat first, he used the rebound in order to launch himself forward with his leg extended ready to connect with the orange-haired girl's gut. Unfortunately for Izuku, Itsuka saw this coming and was able to move back just in time to avoid an attack that would have knocked the air right out of her. Once Izuku realized that his attack wouldn't connect, he managed to spin his body around rapidly before landing on his feet. But he didn't come to a complete stop, still using the momentum he had generated to move into a spin kick while moving forward. Itsuka blocked the attack with her arms, grunting from the impact yet smiling all the same. This, after months of hard work, was the final evolution of all of Izuku's training, the shooting dragon style. This style, named in honor of Albion, used the extensive leg work and training he had gained in Muay Thai, Taekwondo, parkour, and various other martial arts he had learned and brought together with the help of Mr. Kendo in order to deliver powerful kicks on his own as well as using his surrounding in various ways. As for his hands and arms, for right now they were going to be used to block or deflect enemy attacks when he couldn't dodge. Though he hoped that, when he would be able to practice more with divine dividing, he would also include using his dividing ability when blocking. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. But it was something Izuku was taking pride in. For the next several minutes, the match continued as Itsuka sent punch after punch toward her forest-haired training partner while Izuku did his best to dodge them and counter with his own kicks. Sweat continued to roll down their bodies, sprinkling onto the mat, yet neither team paid it any mind as they pushed their bodies further. In the end, it was thanks to the years of experience she had over Izuku that Itsuka managed to deliver a blow powerful enough to knock him down. "That's match. Good job, both of you," declared Mr. Kendo with a hearty laugh filled with pride in his two students. As he did, Itsuka walked over to Izuku and extended her hand to him as she panted heavily with a big grin on her face. For a moment, Izuku just looked at the friendly gesture. When he had first started taking these lessons, the gesture was practically foreign, causing him to flinch. But now, after 10 months, such gestures were common as Izuku finally had a friend after so many years. Itsuka was pretty easygoing, willing to talk to Izuku on just about anything when they were having their breaks or when they happened to meet up in public. She was just herself and Izuku felt like he could just let down his guard whenever she was around. The two had even started hanging out on days when they weren't training to just have some fun together. How that happened, Izuku hadn't the foggiest. One moment they were talking over the phone and the next moment he was in Itsuka's room, which surprisingly had a bit of a motorcycle theme to it, where the girl posed to help Izuku practice his drawing of her for when he included the young Kendo into his hero notebooks. He was honestly surprised he hadn't passed out in shock as he sat there, sitting on a girl's bed. After that, it just became a regular thing for them to simply hang out. Soon enough Izuku took the offered hand, though he did blush as he was helped to his feet, noticing that Itsuka's GI had opened slightly to show off a bit more of her skin. Nothing too perverted, but coming a little close. So the teen did the only thing he could think of and averted his eyes. "Good job, Midoriya," said Itsuka, slightly panting as she spoke. "I can't believe you're the same scrawny kid that came here almost a year ago. Are you sure your quirk isn't some super specific learning quirk? Like you can learn an MSTR martial arts faster?" "Thanks, but I don't think so," equally panting Izuku, feeling the sweat rolling down his face and back as he spoke. Still he managed to let out a laugh, feeling a little bit embarrassed as he kept his gaze slightly downward. "Besides, even if I did, it would be no match for all the hard work you've put into your training." Izuku managed to look his sparring partner in the eye to see her beaming at him with pride, her smile nearly blinding him, just in time as Mr. Kendo approached the pair to further congratulate the pair. That, as well as instructing them to rest their bodies for the next couple of days so they would be in tip-top shape for the entrance exam. After all, it was only a few days away. On the day of the entrance exam, Izuku was making his way toward the entrance of the famous hero school. The teen's body trembled with each step he took as his nervousness began to get the better of him. "Oh man! Did I study enough for the written exam? thought Izuku, knowingly muttering to himself as panic set in. Did I study the right things? I know I did really well in the mock exams, but is that enough to pass? What about the practical exam? I know I'm just going to mess everything up. Relax, partner, rumbled Albion's voice in Izuku's head. Easy for you to say, thought Izuku. You're not the one taking the exam. If I fail, then all of my hard work will have been for nothing. I'll let Mr. Kendo down. I'll let Itsuka down. They'll think that everything they've helped me with has been a waste of time. Do you really believe that? Asked Albion in a serious tone. Izuku's thoughts trailed off as he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, looking down at the ground as people began to pass him by. He tried to imagine their faces, looking down upon him with the same level of disgust and anger that Bakugo would shoot at him. Only, it looked so alien to him. So unnatural. I understand what you are going through, spoke the great white dragon within him after a moment or two of silence. You are not the first human I have been sealed within to let your fears and nerves get to you. Now, take a breath and relax. At first, Izuku wanted to argue with Albion but decided to trust him on this. After all, the ancient dragon hadn't led him astray yet. Slowly, Izuku took a breath before exhaling with equal slowness. As he did so, he could feel the trembling lessen as Albion continued to speak. Good, good. Now that you are relaxed, then perhaps you will listen to reason. Failure is not even a possibility. Not when you have the power of the divine dividing within you. Whatever challenges these fools place in front of you, they shall be overcome by using their own power against them. And what is it your teacher taught you? You have everything you need to succeed. You just need to figure it out. Slowly, Izuku smiled as he remembered the words that Mr. Kendo had told him. Albion was right. He had all the tools he needed. All that was left was to see the problem before him and figure it out. Except. Okay, that'll help me with the practical, thought Izuku. But what about the written portion? I'm still a little nervous about that. Albion snorted. You have studied for this exam more than most of my previous partners have studied in their entire lives. Albion replied with a snort. I highly doubt that there will be anything on it that you wouldn't know. And, should that happen, you need only ask me for assistance. Izuku jumped at that, scaring the people around him with the sudden act. Unable to help himself, the green-haired teen began looking around as if fearful that someone heard that. Ah, wouldn't that be cheating? Asked Izuku in a timid tone. Ha! I am a part of you. Roared the dragon in amusement. Our very souls are connected. It would be more akin to say you were conversing with yourself. Besides, how would they know? That, might be true, admitted Izuku. But it still feels wrong somehow. Now he could practically feel Albion rolling his eyes as he spoke next. Bah! Fine, have it your way. Lightly chuckling at Albion's antics, Izuku decided that he had wasted enough time just standing around and continued along his way. Yet, he did not get far as he heard a girl's voice speaking in broken Japanese, sometimes slipping English words into her sentences. Curious, Izuku began to scan the crowd before noticing a girl with large horns sticking out of her long, blonde hair. Her blue eyes glistened, her voice in a panic as she moved from person to person and shoved a piece of paper in front of them, to which she then pointed to something on it. Most of the people there, all of whom looked like students from various schools, either ignored her completely or just laughed as they kept on walking. He then watched as she approached another student, a tall boy with dark blue hair and glasses, who seemed to just glare at her with annoyance. She once again spoke, but as soon as she held up the paper, the blue-haired teen cut in. Unacceptable, bellowed the bespectacled teen loudly, catching the attention of everyone in the area while making a chopping motion with one arm. If you cannot take this seriously, then I suggest you just go home. With that, the boy stiffly turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving the girl to tremble in a way similar to how Izuku had been not too long ago. Just standing there, trembling as she clenched the paper in her hands while looking like she would burst into tears at any moment. Seeing someone in distress, Izuku did the only thing he could think of. He reached out to her. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Izuku's words, spoken in slightly strained English, caused the girl's ears to perk as she turned her attention onto the divine divider. He could see hope in her eyes as she quickly approached him. As she did, Izuku heard the clip-clop sounds of hooves. Very quickly he noticed that the sound was coming from this girl who, indeed, had hooves. "Why you speak English?" asked the girl in a shaky voice. "Enough to hold a decent conversation," explained Izuku with a nod. "My dad works in the States, so I thought it would be a good idea to learn it as a second language in middle school." "Oh, thank God." As the girl said this, she jumped into the air happily before showing Izuku the paper in her hand. Looking down, the first thing that caught Izuku's attention was the U logo in bright blue at the top. As he began to skim the document, quickly translating as much of the English into Japanese as he could, it dawned on him that he had received this exact same letter. The letter informing him about when and where the entrance exam was going to be. "I'm really sorry," said the blonde-horned girl. "I was a little nervous this morning about taking the exam, so I decided to stop at one of your manga cafes. I always wanted to visit one and I thought it would be a good way to calm my nerves. You know, relaxing with a good manga to take my mind off things. Then I guess I, sort of lost track of time." As she said that last part, the blonde looked away guiltily, making Izuku wonder just how long she stayed there. "Anyways, I trying to find this school," she continued after a moment. "But my Japanese isn't that good yet and no one seems to be very helpful. Guess they all must be busy too. I would have used my phone to get directions, but I left it at my hotel. The last thing I wanted was it going off in the middle of the exam or getting damaged during the practical." Izuku bit his lower lip before glancing around, again noticing the students wearing uniforms from various schools. He had a feeling he knew where they were all heading, to the UA entrance exam. For a moment, the teen wondered why no one was willing to help. After all, they were all trying to become heroes, so why not do something heroic, even if it was nothing more than a small act of kindness, and help her? The answer he got, however, made him sick to his stomach. They're not helping her because they don't want her to show up, Izuku realized with a hint of anger. There are only 36 spots available for the first-year hero course and everyone is fighting for them. If she doesn't show, then that will be one less person they have to compete against. And if she's late, the result will be the same since the school will turn her away if she's even a second late. But this isn't right. This isn't how heroes are supposed to act. As a righteous fury began to bubble within Izuku's body, Albion spoke up. "This is nothing new. Humans will, naturally, often prioritize their own desires and happiness over that of others. It is understandable. That doesn't make what they are doing right or heroic," snapped Izuku. "I never said it was either of those. Just that it was understandable," was Albion's reply. Sighing, Izuku looked back at the girl who stood there looking at him with those big, blue eyes of hers. As he looked at her, Izuku's thoughts became more focused. He knew he couldn't control what others thought or did, but he had full control over his own actions. And he was going to do what a hero should always strive to do, help someone else even at the cost of oneself. Even if helping her meant that there would be more competition for him later, something that might even end up costing him entrance into the school of his dreams, it would be worth the risk just to help her. "Well, I can show you the way if you want," he said, smiling warmly. "Really? You don't mind?" asked the girl, her blue eyes brightening considerably while her smile grew. "I'm not going to make you late for anything, am I?" Izuku just shook his head. "To be honest, I'm actually heading there myself, so it's no problem." "Oh, right. I have introduced myself. My name is Izuku Midoriya. And I'm Pony Tsunatori," said the American girl with a bit of a peppy jump. "And thank you so much. I really hope we both get in. It would be great to have a classmate that can speak English and is nice." Izuku grinned, voicing his agreement as the two headed off toward the famous school. What neither of them knew was that the whole thing had been caught on a hidden camera. One of the hundreds placed around the area surrounding the UA. It would also come as no surprise that they also didn't know that a certain principal had watched and listened to the entire exchange, smiling into his teacup as he wrote down a series notes. Eventually, Izuku and Pony made it onto the ground of U, where Itsuka was waiting for them. When Izuku first spotted his orange-haired friend, she was leaning against the gate as she looked down at her watch. It was hard to miss her worried expression, biting her lower lip the entire time. No doubt she spotted him out of the corner of her eye as, when they began approaching the big fist girl, Itsuka looked up in both relief and annoyance. Then her face morphed into confusion when she noticed Pony standing next to Izuku instead of moving with the rest of the crowd. After a brief explanation of why he had been a little late in introducing Pony, the three went into the building to take the written portion of the test. Needless to say, the written exam's difficulty lived up to the school's reputation. It seemed like none of the questions were straightforward as nearly every single one of them was written in a way that was meant to trip or misdirect the students into answering it incorrectly. Even Albion, who looked down at the test through Izuku's eyes, found himself struggling to answer the questions. Thankfully, Izuku did not rush himself, reading and then rereading the questions as many times as he felt necessary before fully understanding what they were asking and then writing in his answer. As he worked, his attention was drawn away from his paper several times thanks to a few people who were overconfident in their cunning as they believed that they were smart enough to cheat and get away with it. Such thoughts were swiftly proven false as the teachers who patrolled the auditorium would silently rush over to these less than honorable students to catch them in the act and instantly remove them from the premises. A more disheartening sight were those who sat there, looking down at their test papers in abject horror before just getting up on their own and leaving. When the exam was over, Izuku spotted Itsuka who gave him a grin along with a big thumbs up which he returned. He then looked around to see that Pony also seemed to be in high spirits. After a little bit of a wait, Present Mike entered the scene to explain to them the practical portion of the exam. According to the DJ hero, they would be fighting a large number of robotic villains within mock cities. There were 3 different types of villains, each one with a numerical value based on their level of difficulty, with 1 being the weakest while 3 being the strongest. Basically, you got points equal to the villains you defeated. It seemed simple enough. But Izuku did have a nagging feeling in the back of his head that they weren't telling them everything. Then, as that blue-haired student began asking about the 4th robot on the sheet that they were all given, Izuku decided to get Albion's opinion while doing his best to pay attention to what was being said in the real world. "What do you think, Albion?" asked Izuku after conveying his opinion on the matter. "I believe that your suspicions have merit," agreed Albion, Izuku imagining the great dragon nodding as he spoke. Given how the written test was presented, it would be foolish not to expect some sort of surprise. For example, if there was a way to gain points, then perhaps there is also a method by which points are lost. Izuku nodded, barely even noticing that the blue-haired teen had chastised him in front of everyone as it looked to all the world that he was lost in his own little world while mumbling to himself. "Sorry, just thinking," said Izuku quickly. That seemed to barely pacify the other teen, whose attention returned to Present Mike as soon as he began to talk once more. And as he did, Izuku went back to his conversation with Albion. "Right," thought Izuku as he did his best to keep his muttering low. "We should keep our eyes open. However, I am a little worried that we're facing robots. I've never taken the energy from something that wasn't alive before. Is it possible for divine dividing to work on a robot?" Replied Albion, the ancient dragon pondering the question for several long moments. In the past, divine dividing has been able to absorb the energy from angels, devils, fallen angels, dragons, magical attacks, and so forth. I see no reason why you shouldn't be able to do the same thing with robots. However, Albion's words trailed off as the students around them began to rise from their seats, heading toward their assigned battle zones. Patiently the dragon waited, hoping that Izuku could figure out what he was about to say. Thankfully, he didn't need to wait long. The drain might not affect them the same way. Izuku realized, his worry quickly returning. I mean, can a machine's strength be cut in half? Its speed. I've seen machines slow down when their power is really, really low. But this. I might need to use divide a couple of times to get them to that point. See, can my body handle it? Oh no. No, no, no. I knew I should have tested divine dividing more. Izuku was now moving towards the locker rooms, a hand on his chin as he continued to be deep in thought. Okay Izuku. Panicking like this won't get you anywhere, the teen thought. Just need to focus. I'm a lot stronger than I was back when I first used divine dividing, so I should be able to handle the transfer better. If I continue to use that energy to its max potential, then maybe I can burn through it quick enough to use the divide on the same robot a couple of times. Maybe 3. That will be 30 seconds, so I should be able to dodge their attacks. Perhaps I could try looking for any structural weak points while I'm dodging. And so, Izuku's mind continued to try and work out the problem as he headed towards the test that would determine his fate. The vanishing hero Izuku Midoriya had hoped that there would be at least one familiar face within the group heading to his testing site. Someone like Itsuka so that they could stretch together, or Tsunatori so that they could have a chat. Stuff that might help ease his nerves. But, alas, the universe was not too kind to the boy, as the only familiar face he saw was the blue-haired teen that had scolded Tsunatori. As Izuku began to stretch his legs, he momentarily considered approaching the taller teen. To simply explain what had happened this morning, and perhaps then he could help arrange a proper apology from him. However, upon looking at the stony and harsh expression the boy was giving off, the teen decided against it. This teen had already shown that he was easily triggered into thinking the worst about others around him. Odds were that if Izuku did walk up to him, the other teen would loudly chastise him. Maybe after the exams, when everyone wasn't as stressed, he'd wait a moment. The bespectacled teen's legs had exhaust vents in them. Seeing them brought Izuku's mind to the Ida family and the turbo hero, Ingenium. Was this guy related to them or something? As the young Midoriya's mind began to spiral into his analysis mode on the possible Ida boy's quirk, the door to the testing area opened. For a moment, no one made a move as they all just stared at the empty city within. Come on. Come on. What are you all standing around for? Yelled Present Mike from up above. Almost as one, the students turned their attention upwards to find the man looking down at them just to the side of the gate with a manic smile on his face. There are no countdowns in real life. The test's already begun. With that, everyone began to run right into the city at top speed. Some, like the maybe Ida boy, shot past the rest with amazing speed, leaving the rest of the group far behind. Then there were people like Izuku who, thanks to his intense workout regimen, managed to stay in front of the pack without feeling winded. It didn't take long before the first robotic villain was spotted. A one-pointer robot came out of a nearby alley up ahead, looking like it was ready to take down all the students by itself. Upon seeing it, there was a moment when Izuku felt fear touch his heart. After all, this was a machine built to test them. To fight them. But the holder of the divine dividing pushed down that fear the same way he did when he was jumping from rooftop to rooftop with Mrs. Kendo. As the teens behind him began screaming dibs on the metal foe, Izuku sped up to his max running speed. Though he did not immediately activate divine dividing, Midoriya's eyes began to scan his target to find its weakness. While fighting a robot without one's quirk might be considered very foolish, the green-haired teen knew he needed to do this. Needed to confirm that, in case divine dividing didn't work on machines, he still stood a chance in this exam. That, as well as something a bit more personal. A part of him needed to know that if he had entered into this exam without any real power, be it a quirk or a sacred gear, that he still stood a chance at being a hero. By the time Izuku was right in front of his foe, the green-haired teen had settled on his target. With all his honed reflexes, the teen bent his knees before leaping up into the air and curled himself into a ball as he began to spin around. Quickly gravity called him back to earth, the teen sticking out a leg as fell and slammed it right into the neck of the machine. Upon contact, a cracking noise filled the air before the robot hit the ground with its lights dimming into nothingness. It was down. Izuku Midoriya had received his first point. However, there was no time to celebrate his victory. He had won nothing more than a single battle while the war raged all around him. The other students knew that as they were already moving deeper into the city as they looked for more robots to fight. So Izuku wasted no more time as he began to look for another robot to defeat. He didn't have to search for very long as the tank-like three-pointer robot came crashing through a wall right in front of Izuku. Acting on instinct, the green-haired youth leaped back just as the machine turned to face him while firing several RBB bullets from its back. While Midoriya managed to avoid the majority of the attack, one of the projectiles grazed his leg with enough force that it ripped right through his breathed leg while leaving a deep red mark across his skin. Letting out a hiss of pain, Izuku lunged over to the side to avoid getting hit again as his eyes scanned the machine. Sad thing was that this one didn't have such an obvious weakness as the first, and its body looked like it was made of much thicker metal. Perhaps with time, he could uncover the hidden weak spot. But time was the one thing he did not have in abundance at the moment. Guess now is as good a time as any to see if this works. With that thought, Izuku activated Divine Dividing. Instantly he felt the power in his left hand begin to pool, the blue gem forming for all the world to see. But then it vanished. No, wait. It moved. That power shot through his arm, into his shoulder, and then settled into his back. For a moment, Izuku was confused as to what was happening to him. Then from his back sprouted 2 white wings, each one holding 4 feathers made of bluish energy for a grand total of 8. Unable to help himself, Izuku stood there as he marveled at the change. What is this?" asked the bewildered Izuku. The three-pointer responded by firing at its target once more. Again, Izuku leaped to the side only to see that both his speed and leap had increased. Almost like he was flying. Well, he did have wings now. "Congratulations, partner," came Albion's voice within Izuku's head. "It seems like all your training has paid off. Your body is now capable of handling the first stage of Divine Dividing. Now you can make full use of your new abilities." "New abilities?" asked Izuku internally, shooting forward towards the three-pointer to quickly make contact with it. "Divide," cried the green-haired boy aloud. Midoriya once more felt a surge similar to when he used Divine Dividing on Bakugo nearly a year ago. He could feel the power coursing through his being, the machine's strength and speed being added to his own. Only this time it didn't feel as fleeting as that first time. With wide eyes and a rush moving through his systems, Izuku jumped onto the machine's back where he then sent a downward kick right into the back of the three-pointer's head. As Midoriya had expected, this one was a bit tougher as it needed a second kick before the head would break off from the rest of the body. And while this was going on, Albion spoke. "Yes," was Alibion's reply, with Izuku somehow getting the sense that the dragon was nodding. "Since you are a little preoccupied, I'll keep this simple. The wings on your back aren't just for show. Nay. The energy that you have stolen from your foes shall be spread throughout the feathers, and any excess energy will be released from the tips. Just think of it as storage that you can use to keep yourself stronger longer with a built-in runoff system. But be warned, if you drain too much energy with no way to release it, then you shall have to endure the strain that comes with it. These wings will also grant you flight." "Gee, good to know," thought Izuku. Glancing around, Izuku found that he was alone. The streets seemed utterly devoid of any of the foe villains. However, he could hear the sounds of crashes and explosions off in the distance. No doubt the others were racking up a good deal of points. If Izuku wanted to pass this exam, then he would need to hurry up. Bending his knees, the teen prepared to take off into the sky at full speed without really thinking about it. This, sadly, proved to be a mistake as Midoriya became nothing more than a green and blue blur rocketing through the air while screaming like a madman. His hands thrashed in front of him while the world rushed past him, the buildings he passed blending together. He felt himself going up, down, twirling in the air so fast that he could vomit at any moment, and so much more. New fear swiftly came to life, knowing that if he didn't get control of this soon, then he might meet his end by crashing into the street or into one of the mock buildings. Finally, with a Herculean effort, Izuku put all his focus into stopping. And it worked. The teen stopped instantly with no whiplash. He hovered in the sky, panting while doing his best not to look down. That was a stupid idea. As Izuku panted each and every word, he realized that before he could do anything else he would need to get the hang of flying. Not just so that he could continue the exam, but also so that he would not become a splat upon the ground. Since time was a factor, Midoriya knew he had to make this both quick as well as effective. After taking a breath, the teen leaned to the left to see what would happen. Thankfully he did move in that direction. So Izuku decided to experiment a bit more as he leaned right, forward, and backward, finding himself moving in that direction. Okay. He could work with this. Now that Izuku had the basics down, the teen began to move downward toward the foe city below. Albeit a bit slower this time, his speed was more akin to a sprint than the super speed he had been going mere minutes ago. Yes, Midoriya knew that he was running out of time. However, he also knew that if he did anything like that again, then all he would accomplish would be wasting more time. Later he would begin to practice more with his wings, learning how to fly and how to fight with them. But for now, he had to focus on the test right in front of him. It didn't take long for Izuku to find more robots. 3 of them, 2 one-pointers and a single two-pointer. Still in the sky, none of the metallic foes had noticed him. A factor that Izuku would capitalize on. Wasting not a single second, Izuku shot down towards the ground while looking like he was doing a flying kick. One aimed right for the center of the two-pointer. The blow landed, the machine's parts flying all around before either of the other 2 machines could even turn around. Swiftly Izuku shot toward one of the one-pointers to make contact. Divide, yelled Izuku. A smile appeared on the teen's face as his divine dividing took effect once more, the robot slowly turning to look at him. Or, rather, where he had been, as Izuku was already above the 2 machines. An axe kick was sent down into the arm of the drained one-pointer robot, severing it completely as the green-haired youth then spun around in the air so that his opposite heel would connect with the robot's neck. Crack went the neck of his robotic enemy, its body slumping to the ground as Izuku managed to just barely grab hold of the severed limb before it hit the ground. The last one-pointer charged forward with its arm pulled back, yet Midoriya was faster. Gripping the metal arm with both hands, he swung it right into the midsection of the foe villain. A loud clang echoed through the air as metal embedded into metal while sparks began to fly. Not another second was wasted as Izuku kicked the makeshift weapon in deeper, the robot powering down and earning the teen another point. Upon realizing that all of his foes were down for the count, Izuku took off to look for more villains. Then, after a few more minutes, the ground began to shake. What's going on here? That thought echoed through the young Midoriya's mind as he took to the sky, the ground shaking at an alarming rate. Then there were the students whose screams of horror occurred mere moments before the teen spotted them racing through the streets. It looked like they were scrambling to get away from something. Theories of what was going on flowed through Izuku's mind as easily as a river. Was it an earthquake or some other natural disaster? Or was there a gas line underneath the city that ignited after one of the students used their quirks to destroy a robot? Maybe even someone's quirk going out of control. Whatever the case, the airborne teen flew out into the middle of the street and looked at what the others were running from. What he saw caused his eyes to widen while a feeling of utter insignificance overtook him. It was the zero-pointer. The sight of it boggled the mind, nearly causing Midoriya's mind to crash and reboot. It was larger than life as it peered down at the fleeing students from above the buildings with its giant metal head. Giant metal claws crashed into the buildings around it, breaking them apart with no effort at all as pieces fell to the earth below. How thick did the school have to make its metal frame in order to keep it from falling apart? Instincts told the teen to flee, that he stood no chance against such a foe. The rational part of his mind agreed as it began to lay out a plan. While everyone else was running for their lives, he could take advantage of the situation to find more points. Turning, Izuku was about to do just that had it not been for the sound that his ear barely caught. Turning his head, Izuku saw rubble moving on the street and, was that a person underneath? From where he was, he couldn't properly identify who it was. But he could make out the figure of something that was clearly human. A human life that, if someone didn't do something soon, would be snuffed out by the approaching zero-pointer. Clenching his fists, Izuku's mind began to race faster than ever before in his life. He had to do something. If All Might was here, he could have solved this easily. The mighty symbol of peace would have appeared in front of that person in an instant, throwing off the rubble before punching the giant tin can. But could Izuku do any of that? He could try flying down there and saving whoever it was, but what would happen if he or she was pinned down with something or if the rubble was too heavy to move? What if that thing began to fire some sort of projectile that knocked him out as well? What if the zero-pointer began to speed up and crushed the two of them before making its way to the rest of the students? Could he take the robot on with divine dividing? So far, the other robots hadn't given his sacred gear too much trouble. But something told him that a machine like that would have a lot more power. If he did use divine dividing and he couldn't handle it, then that would be it. And even if he could, he doubted that he could destroy that thing with a punch like All Might. Even if he punched it over and over again 1,000,000 times, all he would get would be bloody knuckles and broken hands. So what could he? Just then, the words of Mr. Kendo cut through his panicked thoughts. He remembered how the man had told him about his greatest handicap, himself. For, at that moment, he had allowed his fears to get to him. Had allowed himself to start thinking like the old Izuku Midoriya who wanted to be so very much like All Might. But, he wasn't that person anymore. Now, he had his own wings to soar through the air. Literally. He had all the tools he needed to succeed. He just needed to figure it out. So, after taking a breath, Izuku flew through the air a bit faster than before towards the head of the giant robot. Once he got close enough, the teen spun in the air and sent his heel right into one of the 8 red eyes of the zero-pointer. Upon impact, the lens cracked in a spider web formation. Taking half a second to admire his handiwork, the green-haired teen moved back before beginning to circle around its massive head like an annoying fly. From time to time he would deliver a kick here and there against its metallic shell, knowing it wouldn't damage it. But the point of this wasn't to damage it. The Divine Divider knew he was taking a risk with this plan, hoping that this machine was programmed to attack the nearest student or the one who proved to be more threatening. But as long as he got it to focus on him, then the rest of his quickly made plan would, in theory, work. After the third pass around its head, the zero-pointer's arms moved as if to swat the teen. Something that the teen easily dodged, zipping to the side as he saw the metal limb coming a mile away. A second arm tried capturing him within its clutches, only to be met with the same result. Briefly, Izuku wondered if this was what it would be like to fight someone with a gigantification quirk. With the zero-pointer's focus now on him, Izuku got it to turn its back on the helpless victim on the ground as well as the other students taking the test. Slowly it followed the green-haired teen with the glowing wings, who dodged each of its arms with ease until they were far enough away. Then came the more dangerous part of Izuku's plan. After dodging one last swipe, the Divine Divider landed on the attacking arm before looking up at its head while trying, and failing, to smile smugly. Well, it didn't take long for the shadow of a metallic claw to surround the teen. A moment later, it came crashing down, creating a scrapping noise that could be heard all over the testing area. All in the effort to eliminate the annoying fly. Only its effort was in vain as Izuku easily flew out of the area of impact. But the zero-pointer didn't let up as it slid its clawed hand down the arm toward where Izuku was. The Divine Divided waited till the last moment before flying up and over the mass of metal to see the damage the machine had done to itself. That's when he saw it. While the armor plating on the giant was thick and no doubt strong, the force it had used was enough to dent and break off parts of the shell on its arm. Heart pumping faster, the teen spotted several holes that looked big enough for him to enter. And, much like how a virus enters the human body through a cut, Izuku flew into the inner workings of the zero-pointer. There, he began to break everything he saw with ease, as it seemed like the people who made this never considered the possibility that someone could get inside. Explosions both large and small erupted all around him as the teen made his way deeper inside. It was only when he noticed that everything was powering down that he exited the now still machine. For a moment, he stood there gazing at his work. His accomplishment using his own skills. A laugh escaped his lips as he felt the same pride he had when defeating the one-pointer. A part of him felt like celebrating the fact that he had defeated the foe that so many others had run from. More importantly, he had saved the life of that person. Speaking of which, Izuku turned his head to see that whoever was in that rubble was still there, as there had been no one else around to help. Without really thinking about it, the green-haired teen flew down to where the person lay, finding a pretty girl with short brown hair whose face broke into a smile the moment she saw him land. But as he began to lift the debris off of her, present mic announced that the exam was over. A couple of hours later, a cleaned-up Izuku Midoriya was walking away from the school with Itsuka Kendo next to him. As they made their way to the train station, the two talked about how they did in their exams, Itsuka explaining how she grabbed robot after robot with her large hands before either crushing them or simply throwing them at other robots. A smile appeared on Izuku's lips as he listened to her words intently, while his eyes watched as her face lit up with fiery excitement. A passionate flame whose color he believed matched the color of her hair. He was almost ashamed to admit that he hadn't done nearly as well as she had, barely scraping up a dozen or so points before the 0-pointer showed up. Then. "Oh my god, Izuku! You took down that giant," exclaimed Itsuka, her eyes shining with amazement. "I didn't even think that was possible when I saw it." That caused the young Midoriya to chuckle at that, scratching the back of his head. "To be honest, I don't think I would have been able to do it if it hadn't been for what your father told me back when I started," he admitted. "And I don't think I would have been able to get as far into the exam as I did without the trying the both of you gave me." The boy paused, looking at his orange-haired friend with a slight blush on his face. "Remember what you asked me back when I first started at your family's dojo? About hating myself. I guess I really did back then. I just thought I had to be something completely different to save people and bring smiles to their faces. That how I had nothing to offer. But now, because of you and what happened today, I can say that I don't feel like that anymore. Because I was able to save that girl with my own skills and I made her smile. All I really needed was the confidence." Itsuka smiled back at Izuku, a slight blush on her face from the praise. "Thanks, but I really didn't do all that much," she said before her face turned more serious and worried. "But, what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to keep trying to become a hero," Izuku said instantly, as he had already thought about this while he had been changing. Isn't the only hero school out there. So I'll keep working hard so that I can get into a good one. Then, maybe I'll see if I can transfer. So that I can join you at again." Itsuka smiled at that while moving a bit closer to the boy who had become a close friend. "Say, we still have some time before our train arrives," she said. "How about we take a moment to celebrate? I saw this little coffee shop near the train station this morning that looked nice. So let's go there and give a toast to a job well done." Smiling, Izuku nodded. A few weeks later, Izuku was in his room holding an envelope from UA. No doubt holding his test scores as well as his rejection letter. A part of him didn't even want to open it, instead wanting to focus on the exams for Shiketsu, Ketsubutsu, and Isamu. After all, what was the point of reading something when you already knew what it said? Then again, he was curious to know how he did on the written exam, so maybe it was worth opening. Perhaps he could see where he needed to focus his studies for the other hero schools. Taking a deep breath, Izuku opened the envelope to find not a sheet of paper but a disc that landed on the ground with a clang. Then, as the teen blinked in surprise, the device lit up and projected the image of All Might himself. "I am here." A holographic projection," declared the projection. Izuku stumbled back at the declaration of the number 1 hero dressed in a PNSTRPPD suit. What was going on? Why was All Might doing this? Now, Izuku Midoriya, I shall be giving you your test results, continued All Might without giving a single answer to the questions going on inside Izuku's head. For the written portion of the exam, you scored fairly high. Izuku watched as All Might stepped to the side as a screen appeared next to him. On it was a picture of the broccoli-haired teen along with his name. Below that were his scores on the various subjects of the exam. As he looked over them, a smile appeared on his face. All Might was right, he had scored high. Sure, none of them were perfect but they were close. And at the bottom of the exam, it showed that he had placed fourth in this portion of the exam. You should be very proud of this young man, spoke All Might again after a moment. But, we both know that it's the practical that you are really interested in. For that, you scored a total of 8 villain points. A soft sigh escaped Midoriya's lips, his shoulders slumping slightly. Only 8 points. That was slightly worse than what he thought he had gotten. Figuring that there was really no point in hearing anything else, the teen got up to turn off the projector only to stop when he heard what the number 1 hero said next. Frankly, it's not a very impressive score when compared to the other examinees, the tall man said. But fear not, for there were other factors involved with this exam. Behold as I show you a video. Izuku froze as All Might pulled out a remote from nowhere, the image of his test scores being replaced with something else. It took the teen a moment before he recognized the scene. It was of him and Tsunatori right before the exam. When he had helped the American girl find the way to the school. But, what did that have to do with anything? The truth, young Midoriya, is that the exam started before you even reached the main gates of the school, explained All Might. Cameras were placed throughout the city, watching to see what our new potential students were like when they thought we weren't watching. What you did for this girl, who was a stranger in our country, showed us just who you really were. A person who is willing to help another, even if it does not benefit you in any meaningful way. Even if it might hurt you in the long run. That is true heroism. And for this small act, you were rewarded 8 rescue points by our principal. The screen then changed again, showing Izuku leading the 0-pointer robot away from the injured girl. You then stood up to a foe much greater than yourself during the actual exam, explained All Might, his voice brimming with pride as he spoke. Even though you were low on points, you still chose to help another. This act of self-sacrifice was witnessed by a panel of judges who decided to award you with the maximum of 60 rescue points. Thus giving you a grand total of 68 rescue points. That, combined with the 8 villain points, gives you a total score of 76 points for the practical. Tears filled Midoriya's eyes as he fell to his knees, looking up at the scoreboard that now appeared before him. There he was, scoring right below Bakugo. Welcome young Midoriya, to your hero academia.